Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Zara and today I'm going to be doing a review of Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel. This is a book that's been on my radar for quite a while, and it's a book that I had some expectation going into it because it is a book that quite a few people that I know and whose opinions I respect really love this book. Particularly, I think Penny and Dan were the two people that really kind of put this book on my radar, and I would say played a really big role in me wanting to read it because we have pretty similar tastes. And so I was quite nervous because I know this is a very beloved book. It's very kind of highly rated and I think a lot of people really rave about it. I went into it kind of expecting a rich kind of character study because it's set in the backdrop of what happens after this kind of pandemic happens. And so it's about, people kind of coming to terms with that and trying to move on from that, right? And that's stuff that I love. I love books that kind of center on the events after like a big world event has happened and humanity is no longer kind of what it once was, in the sense that it's not operating in the normal way and it's kind of had to go back to basics. Like, I love that concept as a whole. I've read quite a few books with that, and I've watched quite a few movies and TV shows like that. Like, that kind of dystopian, post-apocalyptic subgenre is a genre that I really enjoy. So I was very excited to read this because it's quite short. It's also standalone. I've heard it was very character driven, and obviously it is this kind of, and the kind of trigger of this book is what happens after society collapses, right? And overall, I think this book was okay. I'm sorry, especially to Penny. Like, I really am. I really, really am. Like, I wanted to love it. I just think that I didn't connect with the characters. There was one other major issue that I had. There were two major issues that I had with this book. But before I go into those, let's talk about what I did like about this book. And I think the first thing that I really have to commend is Mandel's writing. Like, I think she writes beautifully. It's very lyrical. It's quite poetic. I think she's able to get to kind of the root of our characters' motivations and who they are in a way that very few authors are able to do. So absolute kudos for that. I think she's very talented, and I'm definitely going to read more of her book because I'm really curious to see how her writing has developed over time. I also really like the way that she writes character interactions. I think they feel very honest and realistic, and they feel like actual interactions and relationships you could see in reality. The issue is, and this is, I think, predominantly where the focus of this review is going to be, is that I just didn't really like any of the characters. I didn't really buy into any of them, in the sense that while I acknowledge they could be real people and they are, like, what each of them is going through is very real and feels very relatable, I just didn't like the characters as people. And not because they're bad people or morally great, I just didn't find them compelling. I didn't really care about their individual journeys. I didn't really care about them as people. Like, I just didn't care. Unfortunately. Like, I really wanted to, and I really tried to. Like, I quite liked Arthur Leander at the start, but then as the book progressed, I just found him more and more irritating. And the funny thing is, I can't give you a particular reason why. Like, normally I have a reason why, but I just didn't care. And I don't have a reason why. Like, it's so bizarre. Like, I've never had this before where, like, I don't have a reason. Like, normally it's pretty crystal clear in my mind why I don't like a character. I just found them boring. Like, I found them a bit dull. I didn't feel like any of these characters really stuck out for me. They all kind of morphed into one, to be completely honest, and they just did not feel distinct to me. Like, not at all. I read this book, like, at the time that I'm filming this, like 2-3 weeks ago. I've read books 5 years ago and I remember every single character in that book. I read this 3 weeks ago and I'm pretty sure the only character that I remember is Arthur. Like, his name and what he was doing. He was an actor, right, before the events of what happened. But that's the only character that I remember, like, genuinely. They just felt very forgettable to me, and I just think when you have a book that really is like a very intimate character study of each of these individuals, like, that shouldn't be happening. And I don't think it's a Mandel thing. Like, I think it's a me thing. I don't know what it was about these characters that just did not work, but it just did not work. The next thing that I really did not like, and I don't think, again, this was the author's fault. I think this is just as a result of what I'd heard about the book and what I'd read about the book online. Like, this is a book that is set after a pandemic, right? And one of my favorite things about, like, dystopian books and about, like, post-pandemic and, like, post-apocalyptic books is that you see what is happening live, right? Like, when shit hits the fan, right? Like, when people start dying and travel is shut down, electricity goes off, water goes off. Like, you see that all happen in real time, and you see people's behavior change, and you see anarchy start to set in, right? Like, systems basically crumble within a matter of days and weeks, and it becomes like a wasteland. Like, there's no rules, there's no laws, everybody is just trying to look out for themselves. I love that. And yet we don't really see that until the end of the book. There's like one chapter, I think it's like in the last 20-30% of the book, that I loved. And I just wish that chapter had been the whole book. Like, seeing these people grapple with the day-to-day reality of what is happening to them. We get that to a very small extent throughout the rest of the book, but it wasn't engaging enough because, again, we were focusing much more on the characters, and I personally just did not care about those characters. I love that one chapter towards the end. I forgot the guy's name, but like, he's stuck in an airport. You know, we see kind of people's behavior change as they're waiting out for news in the airport of what's happened. And I think that chapter alone gave me more interesting character interactions and more interesting things to think about than the rest of the whole book did. Because I like seeing kind of what happens when people are right in the thick of it. Whereas the majority of the book is set either in flashbacks prior to the events of what happened, or like quite a bit far into the future. I think it's like 10 years later after the events of the book, right? I don't really care about that. Like, I do to some extent, but I think the characters then have to really make up for that. Like, Lost is a really good example. I mean, obviously they crash onto an island, but they're trying to rebuild things from scratch, right? Because they're on this island, there is no law, there is no rule, there is no leader. Like, they have to kind of rebuild that from scratch, and we're seeing them kind of come to terms with that and figure that out as they're going through things. I love that stuff, but I also love every single character, because every single character plays a very specific role and they have a very specific strength that adds to this overall world, right? Whereas in this, I just didn't see that. I didn't see any of the characters really exhibit any of those traits that I would expect to see. Again, I think the issue is that I just didn't buy into the characters. And I think given that this book is such an intimate character study, if you don't like them, you're just not going to enjoy it. And I just would have liked much more time in the now, like as the pandemic was really hitting kind of its height, as we saw the systems really break down. I think I would have enjoyed that a lot more if the book was like that one chapter. Like, I would have loved it. I think it probably would have been a 5 stars, because I think when you couple the writing style with the thematic work and the exploration around what happens when societies crumble, like, that's like a dream book for me, right? And I would probably give it a 5 stars. This, for some reason, just did not work for me. And I think it was a combination of the fact that I just didn't really like the characters, and I also did not really like the fact that it was mostly set on things that were happening very far into the future, or also into the past as well. The other thing that I didn't like, and that I noticed quite a lot of, is that she doesn't use that many full stops. Like, I'm one of those people that I like very precise writing. I am all for lyrical writing. And as I said at the start of this video, she is very talented at writing. But I think there's a point where it starts to detract from the story, and it takes me out of the story, because I'm like, damn, I need to like breathe and I need a full stop here. Like, it's such a minor gripe, but it did impact my overall reading experience enough that I felt the need to mention it, right? So while I love the writing and I think it worked, I didn't like the fact that it was like very, very lyrical. Like, I think it was maybe a bit too lyrical, and it needed a bit more precision to kind of really tighten it up and make it feel more kind of precise, I guess. Overall, I thought it was okay. Like, this is such a negative review, and I didn't mean for that to kind of come across. Like I said, I do think it's a very well-written book. It's just that there were certain things that I just did not enjoy about it. I understand why a lot of people love this book. I really do. And I think that's great. This is no hate to the author, no hate to people who love it. This is just my personal subjective opinion. It just did not work for me, which happens, and it's okay. That's fine. And I'm just giving my view on it. Like I said, I'm very keen to read some of her other stuff, because I do think she's extremely talented. But in this instance, it did not work for me. I gave this book a 3 stars, which again is not bad by any means. Like, it's still more positive than it is negative, right? It's a solid book, I think, for a lot of people, but for me, it just didn't work. Let me know down below if you have read this book, and let me know what your thoughts were. I'm very curious to hear, especially from people who maybe had a bit more of a lukewarm experience. I think the overall kind of perspective on this book is that it is amazing. And like I said, I can see why people say that. just for me, it didn't work. So I'm really curious to hear from people, especially who didn't maybe enjoy it as much as others did. But also feel free to let me know down below if you did love this book too. I'll see you down in the comments, folks. If you like this video, please do give it a thumbs up, and I will see you in my next review. Thanks for watching. Stay safe, take care, and I will see you soon.